He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome to Coast View, the show that celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi a better place to live, work, and play. This is a Chinese proverb. It says, the person who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person doing it. The person who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person doing it. I love that proverb. And we'll come back to it in just a minute, but it kind of sets the stage for this show. You know, when people hear the word human trafficking or sex trafficking, they think of something that's happening far away in some other land somewhere. And they think to themselves, man, what a terrible thing. Thank God we don't have an issue like that here in coastal Mississippi. I did a search this morning, and I wanted to try to see, you know, what's the top news items as it relates to human/sex trafficking around the world. And you'd be amazed. You should go do it. You'd be amazed at the stories that pop up that have been written in the past 24 hours. There's a story about Interpol releasing data on how the coronavirus has been impacting human trafficking. In some cases, it has slowed it down. In other cases, has actually ramped it back up again. There's a story about a Baltimore businessman who paid $90,000 to a sex trafficking operation. That was in the Baltimore Sun. It reminded me of the Netflix special that's on now about Jeffrey Epstein. That's the #1 video series now on Netflix. There's a story out of Madrid, Spain, about police smashing a sub-Saharan human trafficking ring. There's another one out of Georgia about a man facing human trafficking charges in Cherokee County as being part of a child sex ring. And there's one more. I mean, there's many more, but there's just one more from Nigeria about a baby factory there. And man, that's a horrible story. There are so many stories about human trafficking. For a very long time, I've been interested in this subject. I've discussed it with over the years with state officials. I've talked to our bishop here at the Catholic Diocese of Biloxi. Earlier this year, actually, there was even a summit about human trafficking in Jackson. And if you were to look at the bills in the legislature as we speak, there are laws that are being considered to not only strengthen Mississippi laws, but to also create a more effective way to affect people or help people who have been affected by it. It's interesting how these things happen because I was having this incredible Coast View session with Steve Azar. Steve Azar is the recording artist from Mississippi who wrote I Don't Have to Be Me Till Monday and others. He moved from Nashville to Greenville. He's about to release another album. He's just an amazing guy. But while I was doing research for the show with Steve, I came across a song called The Sky Is Falling. I want you to hear, this is part of my conversation with Steve that talks about that song, The Sky Is Falling. Kyle, Steve, what's interesting about your life, though, your work in philanthropy is a great example, not just in the state of Mississippi, but around the U.S. And the one thing that really kind of touched me was that you actually volunteer writing a song or contribute writing a song to a charity. And then whoever the highest bidder is gets to pick what they want that song to be about. And one of the songs, just to give you an example, you've written several, but one of the songs is The Sky Is Falling. And it was a song that educates people about the tragedy, actually, of human trafficking. I mean, to me, that's some of your best work, actually.
I was in South Dakota. I do a charity event there every year, and it was for after-school programs. It was sort of the gift that keeps on giving. And I think a lady paid $25,000 for me to write a song. She gave it to the charity, and it was way more than she calls and she's crying. And her name was Patty Jo. I named Patty Jo's prayer in parentheses afterwards because it sounded like it was a prayer that she was telling me of something that was so close to her heart and that she was so concerned about. And listen, when people talk to you like that, the song is written. It's over. Yeah. It writes itself because all you got to do is I'm getting chills thinking about how she made me feel. And the song was written. And, it's interesting. There's been a big push in the state of Mississippi, and I keep reaching out to everybody. Look, take the song, use it, have it. Because Maine has adopted it, I guess, in a lot of ways, and South Dakota, but I can't get anybody to pay attention yet. So maybe Ricky, you'll get people to pay attention, and they can take the song and have it to use maybe as a vehicle to help raise awareness and some funds to fight this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a passion for this conversation, and it's a sad part of our society, unfortunately. The human trafficking.
Ricky, the interesting part is I met some of the women who were victims and who have overcome it. Mm-hmm. And they're like your sister or your daughter or your mom, and you would never, ever think that these people were put into this horrible situation. So it really hit home for me, man. I mean, I came home and raced home and went and hugged my mom, my wife, my daughter, called my sisters. It was difficult,
What's so powerful about the video is that the girl depicted in the video could be your daughter or could be your sister. It really brings the problem home. What is what is human and sex trafficking? How do we raise awareness around this tragic human problem? How can we help? How do we help you if you've been personally affected? And there are so many other questions that we want to bring attention to on this show. What's the image in your head of what human and sex trafficking is really all about? So let's do this now. Let's listen to a part of Steve's song, "The Sky is Falling."
The sky is falling. Can't you hear me calling out for help? 'Cause I can't save myself. Am I forsaken? 'Cause what's been taken from me was only mine to lose in my own time. Oh, innocent, where you went, stolen of my youth. Here's my body, where's the proof? Oh, what's the use? Hey, the sky is falling.
Wow. The person who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person doing it. There's always more than can be done. That's for sure. But there are a lot of dedicated people in our community here in coastal Mississippi who are really focused on impacting this really important and sad problem. And I've got one of them with me today. Her name is Stacey Riley. She's the Chief Executive Officer for the Gulf Coast Center for Nonviolence. And I want to welcome her to Coastview now. How are you doing, Stacey?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Steve's song, the sky is falling. I bet a lot of the people you deal with at the Center for Nonprofit feels that way, that the sky is falling. And the role of your organization is to show them that it's not. Tell me, what is the Center for Nonviolence?
We are the program, the agency here on the Gulf Coast, and we serve the lower 6 counties. And our mission is to is to support and provide services to individuals who've been through things that no one can imagine. That's domestic violence, that's sexual assault, that's the human trafficking, and that's family members of homicide victims. There's so many tragedies we deal with on a daily basis in our people in our community, and we are that place to go to get help, the place to go to listen to what they have to say.
So what I want to do in this show, Stacey, is talk about. I want to, we'll finish the conversation related to human trafficking. We'll probably take that into the next segment. But then I really want to zero in on, let's take these one at a time. What's the day in the life of Stacey and your staff look like? Where does your funding come from? And how can the community help? And as you and I have discussed before, I'm going to do my level best to continue to bring attention to your good work, because it's easy to turn our head away from it and not be aware that it's happening. And so I want to talk about that when we come back from the break. So we'll come back with Stacey Riley right after this break. She's from the Gulf Coast Center for Nonviolence, and someone who's really dedicated to addressing this problem in the community. See you after the break.
Subscribe for free to the Coast View podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. So privileged that you're joining us today and in this really important conversation about not only human trafficking, but the work for the Center for Nonviolence. We've got Stacey Riley with us today. And when we went to break, we just got a quick overview of her organization. But we had talked about why we came to a place that we wanted to do a show focused on not just human trafficking, but the whole subject of what's happening along the coast and what are the organizations that are dealing with it when it comes to the violence and the kind of things people have to live with. Stacey, some people do think that human and sex trafficking is something that happens in a faraway land. Is that true?
No, absolutely not. It is here. It's here on the coast. It's here in plain sight for anyone to see. The problem with to put a number to what's happening is difficult, because even though it's in the wide open, you can't really tell what it is unless you know what to look for. So we're tasked with doing education along with law enforcement and other entities in the area. But I mean, we have a prime location here. We're on the I-10 terminal. People can come through and bring people to places whenever. We have casinos here that are used very much by traffickers. And the reality of what we're dealing with here is that there's a demand for trafficking victims. So until we eliminate the demand for that, it's going to be here for a long time. And then we also have to task ourselves with changing our focus on what trafficking really is, because for many years, it was called prostitution. And granted, there are people out there who do engage in prostitution and they're not being trafficked, but there's many, many, many more that are being trafficked under the guise of prostitution. And until we can get a better handle on that and be able to recognize it more and to be able to reach out and provide those services here, it will keep going on like many of the other tragedies we deal with in our society.
So it comes in so many different forms, and people can certainly just do a search and read. I mean, it's just, I'm amazed at how bad it can be around the world. Do you have international human trafficking elements that you have to deal with along the Mississippi Gulf Coast that you've seen?
I mean, we have enough domestic trafficking that takes place here. And so international trafficking does come into play with what we do here on the coast, because they traffic in people who are undocumented, so they have something to hold over their head. So you won't see them because they're too afraid to come forward. in addition to the natural fear that's there for a human trafficking victim, if you're not documented, then that's that much more fear you look at, or that keeps you from stepping forward and trying to get help in some way. So we see it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's powerful about the video that resulted from Steve's song, "The Sky is Falling," is that you have this young woman who, she writes vulnerable on the mirror. You can sense that she's a child, and that's what the song is really about, that she's a child and she should have control of her own body. And someone else is taking her body away from her, but she ends up in jail. And so, the stigma is that she's the person, she's the criminal. You see that all the time, don't you? Where it's just sadly someone is brought into this scenario and then is seen as the criminal when in fact they were really a victim.
Absolutely, because you have the ones who are being arrested for prostitution, which, I mean, unless you know what to look for, and unless you speak out that this is what's really happening, these things happen all the time. And then you have the element of drug abuse that takes place in trafficking situations, and not necessarily because trafficking victims freely engage in drug abuse. It's because that's part of the factors that traffickers will use to get someone addicted to substances to better control them. So you have individuals who are being arrested for drug crimes when is a guy's under the trafficking situation.
So what I'm curious, and let's say looking past the past year, what are the ages of? I would assume mostly women. Have you seen men involved as well in this trafficking situation?
Our agency has worked with male victims of human trafficking as well. We see more females than males, but doesn't mean there's more than one than the other.
Yeah. So if you look at the age range, say for the past year, I just say the past year, so maybe you can pull it off the top of your head. But what's the age range just off the top of your head?
Wow. I mean, it goes from 10 to 12 to mid to late 20s is what we've seen, our agency personally. But we know
young?
It's way back. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because traffickers look for people who are vulnerable. So someone who's already dealing with trauma, like they've already been abused as a child in their home, they become prime targets for traffickers to groom and bring in, and then, do what they do.
You see, the Netflix special on Jeffrey Epstein, you see that element, dealing with people who are vulnerable, who maybe have some challenges in their lives already, and bringing them in, and as you say, grooming them. It's a tragic story, but it's just one of many like it. The thought that kids are involved, I mean, I'm a father and I'm a grandfather, and that's the thing that's always touched me about this subject. I mean, all of it touches me for sure, but the fact that children are brought into this and that there's a market for children. I mean, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around that. But you see it. It's not like it's an uncommon thing, is it?
No, absolutely not. And like I said before, we have a demand. There's a demand out there for sex with children. That's how traffickers are able to traffic children. And we have the people we work with over the years. Many of those started in trafficking as a child and couldn't get out.
Man, that's just incredible. So when someone who's been involved, how do they come about getting introduced to your organization? Tell me about that process.
How we usually get access to anyone who's been a victim is either through law enforcement or the local, the statewide Human Trafficking Council. We have the national hotline that works with trafficking victims across the country, and medical facilities will contact us whenever they have encountered a trafficking victim. That's the typical ways.
And so, what do you do? So you get the call. What happens?
We're there to do whatever we're needed to do. So if law enforcement is actually working with someone that's a trafficking victim, we offer them a shelter space, a safe place to come to. We have both shelters in the coastal area, so we're able to provide them a safe place to go to, and then whatever we can do to provide those support services to help them begin that process of overcoming what they've been through. And if the danger is an issue, we look at other facilities either inside the state or outside the state to transfer that person to, because danger is a big issue when it comes to working with trafficking victims. Traffickers are very dangerous people.
Yeah. So I'm assuming over your course of how long have you been there? 20 years, you said?
Yes. 20 years.
That's 20 years.
I'm newer in this administrative role, but I've been with the agency doing a lot of stuff for a long time.
So in that 20 years, you've seen a lot. That's for sure. And have you ever had to deal directly with traffickers?
No, I have not. No.
Well, thank God. Yeah, thank God for that. So what you just mentioned, though, is that so you have a child or an adult, doesn't matter, someone who's been vulnerable, who has been brought into this, who's now in a situation where you've gotten the call. What you sort of alluded to here is that you don't even have, it's not just the issues that you're dealing with around whatever caused them to have the issue to begin with, whether it was an arrest related to prostitution or whatever, but there may be even a drug issue, dependency involved as well. It can be very complicated, can't it?
Yes, absolutely. And you're dealing with someone who's a victim of trauma, but most of them are a victim of multiple episodes of traumatic experiences, gone back, childhood situations up until wherever they are in their life right now. And trauma is a very multifaceted phenomenon to get through. Lots of survival things take place in there that you would never think that you would ever go to.
Mm-hmm. Is there a case? Is there a case that comes to your mind? Obviously, you can't name names or whatever, but is there a case that comes to mind that would be a good one to share with the audience around someone who needed you guys and had a really wonderful outcome, and it's something that touched your heart and that would be good to share with people?
I mean, we have lots of success stories we see as an organization, and to put my finger on the exact one, I know we had one recently where the individual's boyfriend was trafficking her across the country, and she was able to get away and make a phone call to help, and they got connected to our agency through the National Trafficking Hotline. Worked with her, brought her into our shelter program, provided her with whatever we possibly can provide her for, and then we were able to send her to a long-term program, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into trafficking, a lot of programming that takes place.
Let's do this. We're going to finish her story when we come back from the break. We're at the end of this segment, but this is Stacey Riley, the Chief Executive Officer for Gulf Coast Center for Nonviolence, and we'll be back after this break.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Facebook. Facebook.com/SuperTalk MS Coast 103.1.
He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We've got Stacey Riley, the Chief Executive Officer for Gulf Coast Center for Nonviolence. And when we went to break, she was telling us a success story of someone who had been involved in human trafficking. And why don't you finish that story? And then I have another question for you about the process, what it's like to live in a world of human trafficking. But first, finish her story.
With finishing up, we were able to get her set into a long-term program, and that there's a long-term program within this state that's located in Jackson or in Pearl, and it helped her to. She's come a long way from where she was at whenever we first happened upon her, and she's well on her way to being back to the person she's always wanted to be. And just recovering from being in a trafficking situation is very multifaceted as it is. To see her where she is today and where she was when we saw her months and months ago, it's an amazing transformation.
I watched a conversation on SuperTalk Radio this week with the Speaker of the House, and he was talking about legislation around human trafficking and helping people who have been victims of human trafficking, helping them provide services and whatever. Has the legislature, as a general rule, been pretty responsive to this subject?
I believe so. There's been a lot of legislation that's taken place with regard to human trafficking in the state, and we actually have an A-, as a state with regard to our laws, which is fantastic. Our deal comes into is how can we turn that into the services, and how can we turn that into better educating anybody who comes in contact with them. So if there's funding attached to this legislation, then it will open up doors to be able to do a lot more than what we're already doing.
What is life like in that arena for those people that you see on a regular basis?
It comes to a situation where, like, can you imagine being 15 years old and already have been a victim of sexual abuse by someone in your household, and you come in contact with this nice guy who offers you the world and takes you to places that you never thought you could go. And you wake up one day and you're being forced to engage in sexual activity with dozens of people in a day, and that becomes your life. You are forced to live in squalor conditions. You are forced to engage in sexual activity with someone. You have no access to anybody on the outside. That becomes your life, and there's so much fear that is pumped into your head that you can't even imagine life outside of this. And this is going to be the rest of my life, and just having to be able to maneuver an idea of how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? Or how did I get here? And this happens to thousands of people a year. Lots of people in our area here on the coast that have fallen victim to trafficking.
Gosh, that's so hard to hear. You get a
15-year-old girl that's all of a sudden 25, and she's been doing this for 10 years.
Out of sight, out of mind. That's what happens with a lot of people, and it's hard to focus on difficult things. And what it makes me want to do is not just hear the stories, but try to understand more about how an organization like you can be strong, so you can respond to these situations and help these women and men to some extent, get out of this tough situation. So thanks for sharing those stories with me. So what is the Center for Nonviolence has multiple things, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, that it's involved in. So what your primary objective, the thing you see the most of, the things that you're focused on every day the most of, what is that?
Every day we're encountering people who have been a victim of interpersonal violence, and these are probably the worst things that can happen to someone. Sexual assault. In our view, as society's view, as sexual assault is not what you think. It's not the stranger who jumps out of the woods and grabs you. These are people typically Same thing that goes in with trafficking situations. And typically someone that has gotten to know you. There's no situation where someone is in a white van that swings by and picks you up. Yes, those are the rare things, but the typical things are the people that you have some contact with. And I tell you, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, with COVID and the shelter at home and all of that, did you see an increase in domestic violence?
We have had an increase in calls, yes, because whenever you're quarantined with someone that is an abusive person, then those tensions they go up, and they lead to violent episodes more often, or just the fear and the intimidation happening more often. So we've definitely seen an increase in calls.
So you get calls. Sometimes it's just a matter of counseling women or whoever what they need to do next. But sometimes it involves direct involvement from you guys, where they actually come to you. Tell them more about that.
Well, I tell you that I work with a group of rock stars that do a lot of work in a lot of places that people around here don't even know about. Our first contact with a victim of interpersonal violence is typically through either the hospital, whenever we go to the hospital to see someone who has been newly sexually assaulted, or we talk to someone for the first time on our crisis line. Just someone picks the phone up and says, I need to tell somebody about what's going on with me. And it sets the wheels turning with what our staff is able to do with someone or do for someone. And the biggest thing is we're able to give someone an outlet to be able to talk about things that people don't easily talk about.
I had a Coast View session with Christy Pickering, and You know her, and man, what an amazing story. What a tragic story, but what a great outcome, and the way she dealt with her years-long situation, and the book she wrote about it, Courage. Do you find you referring that book to people from time to time?
Yes, because how better to help someone get out of a bad situation by showing them stories or telling them stories of other people who've gotten through this. Because if you're a victim, you feel like you're in a room all to yourself and no one else understands and no one else is going through this. But to be able to see there's other people that are experiencing this, and I do have an outlet or I have places I can go, that's so empowering to be able to access.
What I love about Christy's story is that, first of all, she was willing to do it, and that's really special in and of itself. The way she came to grips with, she wrote, the book Courage is about her process that she went through, but it's both tragic but also one of hope. And it says you can get out. And if you look at where she is today in her life, not only her peace of mind, her relationships, her professional, her community involvement, her sense of peace in the world today. If you see all those things together, it really is an excellent example, because if you go back and look at how long her situation lasted, and she felt like she could not get out of it, and finally she took control of the situation and she took the next step. Other women can find that as well. And her book Courage is about inspiring others that there is a path out, and it just means you have to take that first step. And what would be your message to women who are involved in domestic abuse situations?
Our tagline for the center is, "If you can't tell anyone, tell us." So just find that safe person to talk to, and you don't have to do this by yourself. And that's the biggest thing, is you're never by yourself. Even though the abuser tries to keep you there, there's always some way you can get out and you can get help. And what we try to do is focus a lot on community. Like, what can the community do to help? Because everyone knows someone who's in a bad situation. How can we help hold abusers accountable? So the more we can hold them accountable, the less opportunity they have to abuse someone. So that's like, how do we engage the community much more than what we're doing now, to people to be bystanders and speak out and hold people accountable. And we can focus on the victims as people we can help, but not focus on why'd you stay. It's not about why you stay. It's why is this person allowed to abuse, and why is no one holding that person accountable?
So I'm curious about the relationship you guys have with local law enforcement. Tell me about that.
Oh, and we've had a wonderful relationship with law enforcement for many, many, many years. They do some training with us. We do some training with them, and it's definitely helpful to see what they see when they go into these violent situations, and then for them to see what we do once we get them. It's a win-win situation with learning how to work with someone from different perspectives. So we definitely applaud our law enforcement partners for everything they do, because, as you know, domestic violence is the most prominent phone call that law enforcement agencies get.
So, Stacey, we'll come back after this break, and I want to talk about funding and what people can do to help you and all of that. This is Stacey Riley, the Chief Executive Officer for the Gulf Coast Center for Nonviolence, and we'll see you after this break.
Listen live or on demand and watch episodes of Coast View on your laptop, desktop, or on your phone or tablet by going to SuperTalk.msGulfCoast.com.
Father's Day is almost here, Gulf Coast, and nothing makes Dad more proud than his hometown. So while you're out shopping for that perfect Father's Day gift, shop local. During these unprecedented times, our coast businesses need your support more than ever before. Surprise Dad with something awesome this year from any of our great locally owned businesses. Be local, shop local, buy local, and have a safe and happy Father's Day.
talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We have Stacey Riley, the Chief Executive Officer for the Gulf Coast Center for Nonviolence, and we've been talking about, human trafficking, domestic violence, and all the incredible work that they're doing. The community would be in trouble if they didn't have a nonprofit organization like the Gulf Coast Center for Nonviolence. So one of the things I want to do, Stacey, before we talk about how people can help and where does your money come from, and how can volunteers be involved and all of that, I'm curious, beyond the two major subjects that we've talked about, tell us, go ahead and finish the picture of the things that you guys are involved in.
Okay. Well, when I talk to you about that we provide services to people who have been affected by interpersonal violence. When I say that, I mean wraparound services. Like, we are here to provide everything we possibly can to someone to get out successfully and to recover from what they've been through. So we have our two domestic violence shelter programs that also act as shelters for human trafficking victims. We have counselors who are able to provide lots of recovery work with individuals. We go out to hospitals with people who have been sexually assaulted and help them with that process to just have that engagement with someone in the midst of this issue. We're in all the courts on the coast. We're there to provide a voice to domestic violence victims when they have pressed charges against their abusive partner. So we're there to help them with that process. We have a civil legal clinic that does free legal services for domestic violence and sexual assault victims, and that's divorces, child custody, protection orders, whatever the circumstances are. And then the battery of services with that. And our big piece that we do with the agency is education. We are here to provide education about the dynamics of the populations we work with to anyone that we can encounter, so we can engage people more to the fight to end this. So we have a battery of services we provide for individuals.
So you're also involved when there's a homicide.
Oh, absolutely. We see homicides in the news all the time. We have an advocate that works with the family members of homicide victims. So she helps with the grief process. She can help navigate with law enforcement interviews, go to court with them. She helps them to write letters to parole boards, whatever the circumstances are, to be able to work with someone who's lost someone to a homicide, which is a devastating thing to have to deal with.
Stacey, it's so interesting. You've referred to your staff as rock stars. You describe the kind of counseling that's going on and the kind of the direction that's going on and the aid and the help and all the things that you're doing. You really do have to have rock stars in order to achieve your goals, don't you?
Absolutely. You have to have dedication, because this is very serious subject matter for anyone to work with. So we try to find humor when we can and try to keep going and try to push through any type of burnout and support our staff, because they do an amazing job.
I bet. I get that. I get it's hard to day in, day out do what you do. But I bet all it takes is the next case and beginning to get your head around that next case. And that's enough to motivate you and create a case for action, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because it's the empowering section of empowering another person is an amazing energy to have in a room.
Yes. Hey, so let's do this. I want you to talk a little bit about who funds your organization? Where does the funding come from?
Oh, we have a ton of grants. That's how we're grant strong. We get federal grants, state grants. We're United Way of South Mississippi, United Way of Jackson and George counties, cities and counties on the coastal area. They provide funding for us. And our big thing we look for, of course, every day is funding from the community, like donations and time and fundraisers that we can put out there to help bring awareness, but also to help us with keeping our wheels turning.
So if I wanted to volunteer, talk about how a volunteer can be involved.
Volunteers can come in different ways. A volunteer can go and help with setting up tables and community events to help educate the community. We've had volunteers come in and build things for us, or clean things for us, or grass cut, or whatever those manual labor type things. We house interns from either bachelor's level, associate's degree level, and master's level that come in and help us provide services. We've had people come in and teach classes with the individuals that program, just life skills type thing is how to get back to.
So when you heard me quote at the beginning of this show and a couple of times during this show, that Chinese proverb that says the person who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person doing it. What did that mean to you?
Anything is possible, and the doers are the ones who need to be in the forefront. So we would not be where we're at today with this subject matter if it wasn't for the doers. If you're going to sit back and say nothing's possible, then you don't need to be part of the fight, or you need to be educating yourself or getting educated to see how you can help. Because anything is possible. Anything is possible.
I agree. And when we think about this terrible conversation around human trafficking or domestic violence and all of that, the state of Mississippi, the legislature with nonprofits and, police departments and cities and states and counties, the whole thing, we all have to work together. It takes a village to solve these issues and to deal with these issues. And for the most part, Mississippi's doing a pretty good job, and we'll continue to stay focused on it so that people can understand that there are a lot of problems in society that we need to solve. Hey, Stacey, thank you so much for your time, and God bless you.
Thank you.
You can also listen live to SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on your Amazon Alexa devices. Once you've enabled the skill, just say, Alexa, open SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast.